Hello, hello.
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 Well, hello.
That's your talk back, by the way.
2:10.
Hmm. So I don't understand this. So what?
No, don't look at the time. If you look at the time, it'll go out the window. Scratch the time.
What is this then?
So 5 minute countdown clip, which you'll run first. I think.
But that's at 9:30. It says.
No, forget the time. Time's wrong. He didn't have a chance to change the time.
Gotcha.
You can hear me if I turn on.
Understood. Understood. Can you hear me, Tan? Okay, brother. Love your work. Yep, audio level okay. This is audio level mic on. And my good friend Shawnee Von Shawn is here too.
Do you want one of those? Right. Oh, taped. Yep. Look, the professional brings his tape.
Oh yeah, it's my whole thing. Wherever I go, I need tape.
I need a table, like a just clear me.
Yeah, I like to be near a wall.
Yeah.
Hello and a warm welcome to all of you tuning in. You join us at a beautiful morning here in Sepang in Malaysia. We are about to go to qualifying for the GT Asia Round 7 of the Championship. I'm Jonathan Green, alongside me Sean. Sean, I'm just wondering, it's been a tough preparation for this race, and no one really knows what they're getting into, really, because it's been a strange preparation, because we're all expecting rain in Sepang, but we haven't had it yet. And it doesn't look, looking at the weather forecast, as though we're going to have any. But they've also got the idea that they're going to do, for the first time ever in the history, a 3-hour race. So this isn't like any normal GT Asia race, is it?
Qualifying will be exactly the same, 2 15-minute sessions as we look at the 5.543 kilometre 15 turn Sepang International Circuit, of course designed for Formula One, another Herman Tilke designed circuit. But no, Jonathan, you're exactly right. This is very, very different. We keep saying it's an historical event, and it is. In the first 6 seasons of GT Asia Series, this is the very first endurance race. 3 hours. Drivers wanted to see an endurance round in the championship, so here we are, ready to go, and it's going to be very, very interesting. A lot of history at this circuit. We've been here 10 times before over the last 5 years, so this is almost home circuit to just about most of the GT Asia Series field. So the result will be very, very interesting. We'll explain how the pit stops go, because there's compulsory pit stops during the event. There has to be. There's a minimum pit stop window. We will explain what that's all about too. But qualifying is going to be the thing, and we saw from unofficial practice on Thursday the lap record that was set last year during
smashed,
the couple of events. It has just been smashed, and it's been smashed every session pretty much since then. The track went off a little bit in the afternoon yesterday, so there's a lot of teams taking data away from that session, and they have been able to work out what they need to do this afternoon when this 3-hour race starts at 3:15, right in the middle of this Sepang heat.
Yeah, we're just coming up to the 9 a.m. hour. It's nice and cool at the moment, but as you say, the heat of the day, 3 o'clock is when we start off local time. So put that and take a look at your links that we've made available for you, so you can tune in and hear what's going on. But it gets hot, very hot indeed, and very few opportunities to cool it down, really.
Well, you're right. We can talk to people if people are interested in having a discussion with us during the course of the 3-hour race.
Yeah, tweet us.
Log on to
let's
Twitter.
Hear from you.
That's the big thing. Twitter.com/GT Asia Series, one word. And of course, there's also Facebook, which is same thing. Facebook.com/GT Asia Series. So we've got 3 hours to get through. It may seem like a fairly lengthy period of time, but it'll be over almost in the blink of an eye. And certainly there's going to be plenty of action. Now, one of the teams that we're expecting is going to play a big part this weekend is the #1 Clearwater Racing team. In the 20 races in the GT Asia Series that have been contested here at the Sepang International Circuit, they've won 11 as a team. Mok Weng Sun, the reigning champion, is having a bad year so far, missed the entire round at Okayama a little bit earlier in the year. He's won 9 of those 11 races, but then you have to add on top of that, Jonathan Green, in the last 2 Sepang 12-hour races, Mok Weng Sun and the Clearwater Racing Ferrari have been the standout. They've won the last 2 years, so geez, there's plenty of experience in that team. I think the next biggest winner in GT Asia Series outside of Mok with 9 wins is Frank Yu with 2.
Yeah.
So he's a very, very big void, and these guys really want to get their championship on track. And the interesting thing this weekend too, not just an endurance event, but double points. So for any of those teams like Weng that have had a drama, they had a fire in the roll-around lap at Okayama, which destroyed the rear of the car, and they had little time to repair it before the third round rather at Fuji. They will be able to get themselves back into the championship. He was conceding that after Okayama, championship for them is over, but this could bring them right back into the equation.
Massive weekend, as you say, for Mark. First of all, it's a circuit he's synonymous with winning at. And secondly, he needs to start winning. It's round 7 of the championship of 11. Got a long way to go yet, obviously. But with the double points, there's no question that this is a huge opportunity for them as we look down at the #1 car that has been not controversial, that's unfair, but there is Mok, just getting himself ready.
He's got the race face on.
Yes, he has. There you go. There's the nod from him.
There's
James
no
Collado,
smile.
his teammate, who very experienced driver, and a real good combination between the pair of them.
We saw James Collado join us during the opening round of the championship in South Korea back in May. He was alongside Weng at that particular stage. At the next round, of course, James Collado, we just should recap, is one of the AF Corsa Ferrari World Endurance Championship stars.
We'll be seeing him in Austin in a few weeks' time.
It certainly will. And Jimmy Bruni jumped behind the wheel for the Okayama round. Unfortunately, only got half a lap through before the back of the car caught on fire, which was a major drama. We didn't see much of Bruni, who was on the podium here last year for the Sepang 12 hours. And then Tony Verlander, the third of the WEC AF Corsa Ferrari stars, joined Weng last time out, and they made the podium and put his championship a little bit back on track. See Jackie Young with the customary camera in hand, walking down pit lane, getting some shots before he jumps in the car. Duncan Tappy behind the wheel of that car, a former M Sport factory Bentley driver, joining the reigning GT Asia GTM class champion in the number 77 JV Global car this year. And they've been the quickest of the Bentleys so far, which is interesting because Andy Merrick, who I'm sure you've seen a little bit of over the years, has probably struggled
this morning
a
at
little bit.
breakfast, actually.
Well, there you go. He's struggled a little bit. It's been quite surprising. We haven't seen much of the number 7 car. He replaced Andy Suchek, the Spaniard who was alongside Jeffrey Lee. That's the leading car there, I think you'll see, with the red and the blue, the leading Bentley. And he's jumped in. We haven't seen much of him this weekend. I think he's probably one that's suffering with the thing that's the big issue here this weekend, and that's the heat.
Yeah, it is very hot out there. But, you know, just going through the list there as we look at Aoki and Arata today, of course, racing in GTM. But, you know, 5-minute board is up. It's interesting. The names you just rattled off, people tuning in, obviously tuning in to watch GT Asia. That's what it is. But I think you need to be aware that the names that Andy Suchek and Annie Myrick, all these guys, Duncan Tappy, Antonio Luzzi, even more obvious. I mean, these are world-class drivers, and yes, they're part of GT Asia, but that has just shown you how far this championship has come. Likewise, the man you're looking at now, Daniel Lloyd, is a junior driver for Aston Martin, just 23 years of age, from Great Britain. Being strapped in, though, is Darrell O'Young. And, of course, Darrell O'Young, World Touring Cars, multi-Carrera Cup winner and Le Mans driver as well. Probably the most experienced driver in Asia, Darrell O'Young, and come through the ranks of Motorsport Asia. We're very proud of him here at Motorsport Asia. He's done a heck of a job over the years and continues to be one of our best drivers, and it's great to see him in the championship, sponsored with Aston Martin by VLT, the energy drink. So you can't miss the yellow and green car.
It's been very visible this year, and in fact, it's leading the championship. Darrell O'Young and Jonathan Venter, who sadly this weekend is not here. He's had a testing accident of his own prior to this event, but on a push bike. He fell off at speed on a corner and broke his hip. He's only young, he's fit, he'll regroup fairly quickly, but that's put him out for the season, which is devastating news. He's been a class act all year, and I'm sure Johnny will be listening back there in Australia. And a shout out to you, mate. I hope you get well soon. We look forward to seeing you back in GT Asia Series very soon. But frustration to have such an incident.
But
when
you know
you're
what Jonathan can do? He can tweet, actually, incessantly
you
for the
need
next
to be
hour.
tweeting. Tell us exactly
Tell
what
us
you're
exactly
thinking.
what you want to know. Tell us what you think of Richard Lyons and Frank Yu. No, maybe not. But please do join in the conversation. That's what social media, that's what streaming's all about. Sean, let's get into the nitty-gritty. We're about to go away. We're about 3 minutes away. This is 2 qualifying sessions, but it'll be a combined qualifying in terms of overall times between the gentleman driver and the professional driver. And again, I think we need to explain that. Each car has 2 drivers. There is a professional driver, and like I said, these are world-class drivers, some of the best. And because we've got so many great factories like McLaren, like Ferrari, you get former Formula One stars like Vittorio Luzzi and Hamaguchi. Hamaguchi, believe it or not, is the B. You'll see a B next to his name. That stands for bronze driver. And effectively, between you and me, that's bronze, silver, and gold. Effectively, these drivers are gentlemen drivers, but you wouldn't think so. These guys have already won in this McLaren. They're struggling a little bit, turbocharged in this humidity. Not an easy car to get the full power out of, McLaren. But like we say, it's a combined combination of the best that the gentlemen times can do and the professionals. So this is going to be a pretty intense qualifying session, because I know it's an endurance race, but you want to get a start. You certainly don't want to start mid-pack here.
Well, I don't know. I had a discussion with a number of the drivers up and down pit lane. Do you need to start from pole in a 3-hour race? What's important? The other side of the strategy, and we spent a bit of time discussing this yesterday, is do you start with your pro driver in the race, or do you start with your AM driver? Now, you can't predict safety car periods. The engineers will have worked out strategy up and down pit lane to work out when and where they want to pit their AM driver and when they want to pit their pro driver. So there's all sorts of things are going to come out. Now, last night, we actually put a release out stating that our official lubricants partner, Motul, has just declared they will provide an end-of-year award to the leading team that qualifies on pole for the bulk of the year. So it's a pole position challenge. Now, so far, poor old Jonathan Venter, if he wasn't crying into his coffee already, he's going to start again shortly. He holds the top points in that race because he's qualified on pole twice so far this year. So there's a little bit more incentive. Is there any need to start on pole? You talk to the Clearwater Racing team and they say, well, look, no, but we'd like to be in the front 4 rows. That's good enough. Is there going to be too much messy stuff mid-pack? You see it on the odd occasion. The one thing here that you've got to take into consideration, of course, at Sepang, is that very tight right-left complex through turns 1 and 2. And that usually sees some kind of action as people battle for position going 2 and 3 wide at the end of that long main straight. So there's a number of things they have to take into contention. Now, here's a guy who's been fast all weekend. We've seen that. Your mate Claude Van Damme. He's been very quick in the TP12 racing Ferrari, and they, of course, Todd Petty and Carlo Van Damme, have been a race winner so far in the 2015 championship. So looks like we're underway, Johnny. It's going to be a very, very interesting session. Now, interestingly, I'll just point this out quickly before we start the session. James Collado said to me yesterday when I asked him, what do you think the pole time could be? He said, well, if the weather conditions are right, I'm predicting a low 2:03.
Whew.
Now, we've only seen 204s so far. In fact, if we go through yesterday's practice times, we're talking about Carlo Van Dam. He was the pace setter. He ultimately set the top time. Now, last year's qualifying pole time was 205.7. Currently, as it stands, the top time this weekend's a 204.4. So will we see a 203? It's likely. Will it be a low 203? Well, we'll see. We'll soon see. We have only 14 minutes left, so these guys need to hustle.
Here we go then, qualifying one for the GT Asia Championship, live from Sepang, wherever you're tuning in around the world. Welcome to Sepang, and it seems like the perfect place really for our first ever endurance race, because this is the track they know better than any, and I'm sure those of you tuning in who know your Formula One or even your Merdeka 12-hour racing, this is a circuit you've seen many, many times before, as have all these drivers, as we look at the famous Turn 4, one of the best overtaking places early on, if any time during a race. And I will be predicting a lot of overtaking. We've got two classes, we've got the GT3s and the GTMs, and we've got a vast array of experience. But I will say this, having watched these guys over the last few years, the quality of driving in this championship is second to none. I follow a lot of national championships, and the Asian Championship, I would have said, is higher in terms of driver capability from the top to the bottom. And I think that's a real accolade to those professional drivers who've really pulled on the gentleman drivers and brought them forward, and likewise the intelligence and the adaptability of the gentleman drivers who, let's face it, when we say gentleman drivers, they have real jobs. They're not racing drivers. They do this part-time, but you wouldn't believe it when you look at a race like this. So we're underway, 12 minutes to go. Cool conditions, 9 a.m. in the morning, and I would have said, as you said, in terms of time, Sean, we could get some very quick times. And Bentley, Ferrari, let's talk about some of the capabilities. You've got two very long straights here at Sepang. You'd look at the Bentleys and say, well, surely they'll have the advantage, they've got the grunt. But it seems that the Ferraris, torque-wise, get out of the corners so quickly that they too get down those straights, and we're looking at the number 37, the championship leader from BBT.
Well, it's interesting you said that. You talk to anybody that isn't in a Ferrari and they go, oh, geez, those Ferraris have got an advantage. And it's all about, as you say, the torque and the power they've got coming out of the very many slower corners here that lead onto long straights at Sepang. We're looking at one now. It can be as much as half a second on the straight. The Aston Martin's powered by a mighty 6-litre V12 engine. You compare that to the Ferrari 458 Italia, it's only a 4.5-litre naturally aspirated V8. You talked about the Bentley, 4-litre twin turbo. Then you've got the McLaren, 3.8-litre twin turbo. The heat is the one thing that the turbo guys are a little bit worried about. So whilst the Bentley's been quite quick, there's two issues so far as heat with the new Bentley Continental GT3, only in its first real full season of competition this year. They are suffering a little bit in the cabin, but also the heat does have a bit of an effect on the turbos. Now, you're right. You say it's cool, but Johnny, it's probably, what, 32 degrees, yeah. 33 degrees or something. So cool by Sepang and Malaysian standards. But at the end of the day, there's been some predictions that the heat could be as high as 39 degrees, which they're saying has a feel of something alongside 45. So you can imagine just how horrific it will be inside the cabins of these cars, some of which can get to 60+ degrees. So the drivers have to think about that. They have 3 hours in the car, so they'll split the stints in half, so it could be up to an hour 45 for the lead driver to spend that amount of time in the car, and they need to keep cool, so they've got cool suits. Some of them got air conditioning. It's interesting that the number 1 Clearwater Ferrari still has the air conditioning system fitted. Yes, but you consider that, you heard drivers talking yesterday, we hallucinate once we start to get hot and dehydrated and all those sorts of things.
They do that at the bar anyway later.
Well,
so.
Yes, that's a little bit later, but certainly it's going to be interesting to take all these factors in. Now, there is another factor here too we have to consider this weekend. We saw the signs in the background as you're talking us up to turn 4. Michelin, they are the control tyre supplier to the GT Asia Series for this year, and they have bought the S9L tyre, very good wearing tyre. We've seen that in the past, but for this weekend, they've actually provided 6 sets for every car for the event. Now, that starts from now. They've got 1 set they can run fresh in Quali 1, 1 set they can run fresh in Quali 2. There are 3 compulsory pit stops, so 4 times, or 3 times rather, after they start, they will have a chance to completely change all 4 tyres. So tyres should be taken out of the equation. We've seen some times, and Davide Rizzo and Anthony Liu, who led the championship up until the end of Okayama, they missed the Fuji round. They're now second in points. at the top of the timetable with a 2:06.43. But James Collado now is starting to fire in the number 1 Ferrari. We see that on screen, and that's quite likely. It looks like, in fact, that looks like Davide Rizzo's helmet. So Davide Rizzo and Anthony Liu are considered equal drivers. They're not professional drivers. They both do other things. They do a bit of driver training and a bit of running around on occasion, but Anthony Liu is a businessman, so he considers himself an amateur driver, but his pace compared to Rizzo is almost identical, if not identical, much like Adderley Fong and Kitasawa in the number 8 Bentley. So they are closely matched. So it's interesting to see which one they decide is the A driver and the B driver. It looks like from that helmet shot that they've decided that Davide Rizzo will be the one to take the first qualifying session. But as you said earlier, there's Duncan Tappy's now thrown in a 2:05.3 in the JV Global 77 Bentley Continental to take the top spot. The other thing we've got to consider is that both these drivers' times have to be combined to set the starting positions for the 3 hour later in the day.
So as it stands at the moment, Duncan Tappy's just gone quickest. Jackie Young spoke to him this morning, really excited about the opportunity to learn off someone like Tappy. He says he's about 4 seconds off him, but that's good enough for him. He's never going to be a Duncan Tappy. He's never going to be a factory Bentley driver. And that's the beauty of what we see here, which is the two combinations of the professionals and the gentleman drivers. Carlo Van Dam and Peter Bakti just getting to the top with 2:04.9. So the prediction that we would get down into the low 2.4s, possibly even lower, has started to come to fruition. And as we say that,
James
Collado does a 2:03.963 here at Sepang. The fastest lap we've seen ever, I would argue, in a GT car. That was incredible. And I think the cool of the morning and the ability of a nice clean track and early morning start to it has really given these guys a chance to let the legs run on these beautiful cars. And Collado and Mock, 2:03.963. As we know, this combination almost not has to win, but feels like that this is their big opportunity with the double points to go for it. Sauer and Fong goes second, 2:04.1.
That's going to be very interesting. I was just pointing that out. You've picked it. Kitasawa behind the wheel. Having said that, though, Adderley Fong was quicker yesterday, so things are really pumping along. And Davide Rizzo and Anthony Liu, looks like Rizzo's in the car. You can see it on screen now, the red and yellow number 37 BBT Spirit of Race Ferrari 458. As Caldarelli now jumps into position number 2 with a 2:04.098, only a 10th off Collado. That's very, very impressive pace from the Triple F racing team by ACM. McLaren 650S driver, and nice to see them in. So we've got Ferrari, we've got McLaren, we've got Bentley, we've got Ferrari, we've got Aston Martin. We have 2 of the McLarens in the top 6. Carlo Van Dam now, who just a lap ago was on top of the timesheets, is now a second behind and shown in position number 7. So things are really heating up. Now Andy Merrick too was in the mix there early. He was certainly inside the top 6. Now shown back down in position number 12. Carlo Van Dam, we were just talking about him, 2:03.402 if you don't mind. Half a second faster than James Collado, but this highlights the whole point we were talking earlier about the Ferrari 458 and its ability to get the power down out of some of these slower corners.
Yeah, and it's interesting. I was looking at session 3 at the end of yesterday. They allowed the bronze drivers to go out on their own, effectively to get some extra time on track, given that they are amateurs. But interestingly enough, you could throw a blanket over them. There's no more than a second between the top 5. So if we look at what we're getting at the moment, and then consider the fact that then the gentleman drivers will go out effectively and try to get that combination time. There's one of them, Frank Yu, getting ready. It's going to be very interesting indeed.
Well, the pace, as you were saying, of the gentleman drivers, 2:06 for Mok Weng Sun.
Yeah.
He topped that bronze drivers session. So very, very interesting to see how these things are going to play out. Now, who's going to be able to put in a quick one? That is Kato, who's alongside Richard Wee, the reigning Rookie of the Year in the second of the Clearwater Racing Ferraris, is now up to position number 5, 2:04.2. So yesterday's top time of 2:04.4, we've seen so far 5 cars go under that mark. Very, very quick.
4 minutes and 50 seconds left of this session. We're looking at Carlo Van Dam and Bhirom Bhakti, the Singer Motorsports car from Thailand. And very successful too. I was talking to Carlo this morning, and he thinks, you were asking the question as to who would start the race. Obviously, they've got the choice. He says he thinks the professionals will pretty much across the board start the race, regardless of, you can't predict safety cars, and he just thinks that in terms of starting the race and sort of bookending it really, but starting and finishing it, he thinks that that's the way to go, regardless of what happens in qualifying.
I wonder how interesting it's going to be down on pit lane before the start of the race. We're going to see drivers both suited up with helmets on, and as to what decision they make.
Yeah.
A little bit like NASCAR, when you're coming towards the end of the stage, you need a splash and go. Who's going to hit pit lane first and who's going to carry on? There'll be all sorts of activity in the pit lane ahead of this race, I'm sure, and be interesting to see how people manage to make their strategies work. Because, I mean, I'm not sure. I said to a couple of the drivers, I wondered whether or not it would be more prudent to start with the AM driver, especially if you have an early safety car period. You have an early safety car period.
I know where you're going with this,
will
because there's more chance of getting a safety car with everybody rushing
you would expect,
position.
wouldn't you? You would. So anyway, we'll see.
Let's just quickly give you a rundown with 3 minutes to go in this first qualifying session. You're watching GT Asia here, round 7 of the championship, live from Sepang in Malaysia. We hope you are tuning in around the world to enjoy this with us, and feel free to be part of the conversation. Tweet in and let us know your thoughts if you want to have a go at us. I've got my own tweet as well, Speed Green. You can ask me questions, but Sean's probably more knowledgeable. So, what's your tweet?
Oh, well, the best one to use is the GT
official
Asia
GT
series
Asia one, yeah.
tweet, and we can address any of the questions anybody might have, certainly during the 3-hour race. We'd love to hear from you, wherever you are in the world.
And we do realise we may not be able to answer all your questions. This is a complicated sport, so to enjoy it, feel free to ask the questions you want to know. If you want to know the specs on the cars, if you want to know why they race the way they race, if you want to know how the pit stops work. In fact, we're going to have some quite long pit stops today. We'll explain that as well. There's a safety factor to that. We've also got Aoki, who's in a wheelchair, and I'll help him because obviously he's at a disadvantage a lot of the times when he's doing his changeover, because it takes time to readjust to a non-wheelchair driver. So I have to say that the former 500cc Grand Prix motorcycle man, though, is handy around the wheel, and he's already won this season in the GTM class.
Caldarelli jumps back into position number 2. He's now also into the 203s, a 203.80. We're talking about the class of driver. I think there's something like 6 drivers in the field of GT Asia this year that have some level of Formula 1 experience.
Yeah.
Adley Fong, you have to remember, is a Lotus team development driver this year. He's yet to turn laps behind the wheel, done a lot of simulation work, spends a lot of time with the team. Andrea Caldarelli, who's, in fact, that's Australian Nathan Antunes, the Australian GT Championship points leader, who's part of the Triple F team here this weekend with his car owner in Australia, Rod Salmon. Andrea Caldarelli has experience in Formula 1. James Collado, I'm not sure, I think he's actually tested F1. So there is a number of drivers, certainly with very high level experience in the...
Faris Fauzi as well, yeah.
Faris Fauzi, absolutely. And we usually see Rio Fukuda here with the Taiwan Top Speed Racing team. Of course, he drove for Honda BAR in a number of test sessions a few years ago. So a lot of depth to experience here for the GT Asia series. So a lot of drivers coming into pits. They've got a 10-minute turnaround time.
The leading car is the car you're looking at right now, which is Carlo Van Dam and Bedabati. And in a moment, we'll see a driver changeover as the clock ticks down. But right now, they are in the pole position of 2:03.4. They are some 0.4 of a second ahead of Caldarelli and Wu. Then it's Lyons and Yu, Frank Yu and Richard Lyons, definitely one of the favourites for this weekend. And Collado and Mock. And as you can see, most of the cars coming in now for our driver swaps, and it gets a bit frenetic out here as we take a look at the number 88, Aston Martin, that of Lyons and Wu. And talking to Wu earlier in the weekend, really enjoying. He's a youngster coming up through the ranks and learning from everybody. And to be part of this Craft Bamboo racing team, big opportunity for him. And you'll see them flash the lights like that. That basically lets the drivers know it's not that they're angry, it's not that they're fed up, which we do when we're flashing our lights. It's just to let the driver, can be sometimes though, it's basically to let the driver be in front know that you are on a qualifying lap. It's hard, it's deceptive to see when you look in your mirrors how quickly a car is going or what part of the track in terms of where they are in their cycle. And so sometimes you'll see some of the drivers flash their lights just to let them know that they're coming through and they do need you to get off the racing line, which, by the way, on a dusty circuit like this, not easy. Luckily, we've got a busy weekend and there's a lot of cars out there for a lot of the time, but offline, it is dusty and dirty, so the drivers who are getting out of way of faster cars need to react fairly quickly as we look at the number 37. I think there should be prizes for pretty cars, and that's one of them. There's no reason why there shouldn't be special points, I think. This is another one. But there's certain colors, there's certain schemes out there that really do stand out and ping out in pictures. Here we go then. After our first qualifying session, Carlo Van Daan and Binnen Bhakti are the top men. A 2:03.4. That was a very, very impressive lap. The only men to get close to them in the 2:03s, but look how close it is. The top four all under 2:04. Caldarelli and Wu with a 2:03.865. Lyons and Yu with a 2:03.8. And in fourth position, Collado, James Collado and Mok Wen Sun, the doyen, so to speak, of this Sepang circuit. The Singaporean has won so many times before, and he's about to go underway here. 2:03.9 is the time set by Collado, and yesterday in the final practice, Mok did a 2:06.1. And as we say, those combinations are what's going to set the grid for this endurance race. Now, how important is that grid? Well, you heard Sean talking about it. It is important because if you predict that there could be safety cars early on, you don't want to get lost in the melee. But 3 hours, it's a long time, anything can happen. So I think it's important, but it's not like a sprint race important. Having said that, who knows? It's Sepang, it's that tight first two corners. Could be interesting. A little further down, Ketasawa and Adelaide Fong spoke, both of them this morning, came in with them this morning. In fact, really pumped up actually about racing here in the 3 hours. And Ketasawa, an emotional time in Okayama for him. In that fifth place overall this morning with a 2:04, just dropping into the 2:04s himself. Just 2 tenths behind Kato and Wee. And a few more tenths, 2:04.5, Tapi and Young. Rizian Liu not showing in the 37s early as I expected. They're in 8th position at the moment, but as you heard from Sean, that combination of Rizzo and Liu is so evenly matched that, as you can see, they're right at the pit entry as well, ready to go. Red flag's still out. We've got a couple of minutes before Q2. But expect Rizzo and Liu to, combined-wise, move up the board from 8th position. And likewise, Liuzzi and Hamaguchi. I spoke to Hamaguchi yesterday, the Japanese driver, and of course they too have seen victory already this season. And yeah, struggling a little bit on top-end power and the heat anyway with the turbos, but always a competitive package and combination of former 80 races in Formula One, Antonio Liuzzi and Hamaguchi. Rounding out the top 10, Darrell O'Young and Daniel Lloyd. Daniel Lloyd, the youngster, coming in to replace Jonathan Ventnor, who's injured. And that's a big blow to that team, the Craft Bamboo team. And luckily, Aston Martin seemingly got an endless supply of great drivers to be able to supply when they need one. With Jonathan out, Daniel stepped in. Daniel Lloyd stepped in, a man from Huddersfield in the UK. And so a lot of talk going on in Triple F right now. See what's going on there. And as you can see, they are lining up to go out. That red flag you see in the bottom left-hand corner will hold them there at the pit exit until the clock ticks down and they can go out for their 15-minute session. Nice to be able to do the qualifying early in the morning like this, just nice and cool, because the temperature will rise very quickly as the hours tick by. Inoki Sato and Richard Wee preparing to get ready for their qualifying session. Five-minute board is out. And as you can see, most of the cars starting to make their way down to the pit exit to get ready for the start of this one. So an important session for Mott Wenson. They really, really want to finish this weekend on a high. And as we've said before, it's going to make it very interesting with double points. And if you look down the championship points, Mott not, you heard from Sean earlier saying they had a couple of problems, including a fire of all things, which put them out of one race. But they are way down the championship. Having said that, if anybody else has a problem this weekend or does not score the points they expect, then they can rush back up the board with a good win here. Sean's back.
Well, that was a long run down to see Carlo Van Dam, smiling from ear to ear, which is probably more emotion than you normally see out of him. He's fairly closed shop at the best of times. I said, how was that? And he said, it was actually not bad. He said, I was very surprised. He said, I think I could have gotten to the 202s, but
wow.
I was held up by one of the Audis. So conditions were pretty good, and the car is spot on. As we say, they've won a round of the championship this year, Todd Pitty and Carlo Van Dam. So look out for them. If they've got that kind of pace, it's going to be very, very interesting this afternoon.
A bearded Daryl O. Young, a Craft Bamboo.
Championship points leader, no less. You'll be watching young Daniel Lloyd making his debut. There'll be a few nerves down there on the grid. Can't imagine there'll be too many nerves in car number 37. But of course, we won't necessarily be able to say that the top time getter or that the person who sets the pace in this second qualifying session actually has pole, because we've got to go through the process of combining session one and session two.
Yeah, we're hoping to get as soon as we can, we'll have a combined grid for you. So we won't read too much into this session. To be honest, I quite like the idea of seeing what the professionals have done. We've just seen it versus what the gentleman drivers do, because that will give us a better indication as to how the 3-hour race will go. There is Takumi Aoki, the man we mentioned before, for Delango Racing. He, in that wheelchair, is involved in a motorcycle accident. He was a very, very prominent 500cc MotoGP, if you will, rider. He and his brothers all involved in motorcycle racing and heroes in Japan.
And for Repsol Honda, what's interesting, if you look at his overalls, he's still being supported now by Repsol.
Well, he's still sponsored by them, yeah.
Yeah. So that's great support. But just an absolute living gentleman. I spent about half an hour with he and Ken Urata last night. In fact, I had breakfast with Aoki-san this morning, and he was very, very pumped up. Last night, though, completely different story. They had cooling problems all weekend. They only turned about half a dozen laps for most of yesterday, and were tearing their hair out, sitting there waiting as the team worked feverishly over the car. There was some concern they'd even make the race, because they could not go out and circulate for more than about a lap without all the alarms coming on the dashboard, and it was purely a cooling issue. So they've rebuilt most of the cooling system in the front of the Delango Racing Giardo LP 560. So they're looking forward to getting some miles, because they're really a threat. In fact, so much of a threat that this weekend the Golf Racing JP team, who are also in the GTM class battle, employed the services of Dylan Durdali, who drove with them in the Porsche GT3R, the GT3 car that the Golf Racing JP team owned earlier in the year at Okayama. But they've drafted him into the GTM class, which is a Type 991 Porsche GT3 Cup car, to try and combat the might of Aoki and Urata, and also the points leader, Jerry Wang. Now, Jerry Wang's done the same thing. He's brought Australian Warren Luff in. Warren has had a little bit of experience in the GT Asia Series. Last year, drove with Craft Bamboo at South Korea, made the podium, but is recognised as one of the best GT drivers in this part of the world. So Warren has been drafted in, and in fact, he set the pace in that first session for the GTM class. So we're talking about two different classes. GT3, which is the outright cars, the newer cars. GTM are for older spec GT3 cars. So the Lamborghini LP560 is about a 3 to 4 season old GT3 FIA specification car. And also you have the Porsche Cup cars and the Ferrari Challenge cars. There's a couple of them here from the Taiwan Top Speed racing team, which came very close to taking the championship last year. But the winner, second time he won the GTM in the GT Asia Series, was Jackie Young, who you spoke to this morning, and one of the loveliest blokes in the GT Asia Series. Really enjoying his time in the Bentley, struggling a little bit with it because it's a much bigger, much faster, much more different car to drive than the Audi that he's been used to. And there is his teammate Jeffrey Lee from J-Fly Racing, part of the Absolute Team Bentley operation, sitting in the car getting ready to go. So it will be interesting. This is the B drivers. In many cases, this will be the amateur driver in the team setting their time, and then we'll have that combination of times for the grid for this afternoon's historic. We keep using that word, but it is. It's historic, an event for the GT Asia Series. In 6 seasons, this is the very first endurance race in the championship. So it is going to be very interesting.
This championship, of course, began in Korea. We went on to Japan, Fuji and Okayama. Okayama first, and then on to Fuji. And this is the 4th expedition back to Sepang, where so many of the teams are based. And still a long way to go in the season yet. But these cars all dialed in. But the story that is Bentley, the GT3 Continental, has been a fantastic story. They bounced onto the scene at the end of last year, and it's funny, even some of the really cultured journalists and drivers, when they first got a glimpse of this car, said, well, I'll never make it, too big, too bulky. But they were absolutely wrong, and they jumped straight into contention. I think it was Shanghai, and also they were used as a safety car at Macau. And again, then watching them actually race last year, we knew coming into this year that they would be one of the favourites, and they haven't come to make up the numbers. The Bentley worldwide pursuit, if you will, of GTs is a very serious one. I was talking to the team from Keswick in the UK, where they prepare the M Sport team effectively, and they've got I think something like 22 cars now in competition around the world, and it's a very, very special car to look at. It was one of the cars that I really wanted to take a closer look at when I got here today, got here this weekend. I've seen the Aston Martin, it's very familiar to me, and obviously the 458, now a decade of racing, so most people are very familiar. But that GT Continental, you need to get up close and have a real good look at it. It's a beautiful, beautiful car.
They were saying from the road car to the race car, that took something akin to 500 kilos or more just out of the doors in order to get it down to racing weight.
Well, it's all that plush leather, you see. It's all that luxury.
And all the electronics to make the seat just feel perfect. And
I still think they should do away with the chauffeur, though, because I think that takes up too much weight.
Oh, no. It's nice to just sit in the back and have a quiet drink whilst you're circulating.
I mean, if they did, can you imagine what that... I mean, they'd be under the 202s, I would have thought, without the chauffeur.
OK, so we're going to start to see some hot laps. You're digressing, aren't you?
11 minutes to go in qualifying 2. Rizzo and Lou still top the times after Rizzo's time. Oh, Young and Lloyd still second place at the moment. We'll get a combination of those times, but we're now looking at the gentleman drivers in action here at the famous Sepang circuit. We're at the back of that circuit, some really quick turns, including this left-hander here, which is one of my favorites coming through here. Really quick through there, and then this double combination. Probably one of the trickiest corners on the track, this last corner onto the back straight. Get it right, and you can slingshot yourself down that back straight, down towards turn 16 for that final corner. And this is where we are now. There's another pit lane to the left there for some of the national races. But, of course, we are using the Grand Prix circuit, which Formula 1 and MotoGP. And I think that's why people know Sepang as well as they do, because Formula 1 have been coming here every year, as have MotoGP. Now World Superbikes as well. And, of course, the NECA 12 Hours. It's a circuit that now is well known around the world to the racing fraternity. 205.5 so far by this car. The VLT Aston Martin number 99 of Daniel Lloyd at the wheel, 205.5. And 205.7 by Anthony Liu. There he is in the number 37 Ferrari. And again, I say there should be points for pretty cars, and I think that's for me anyway, the prettiest car out there. Very distinctive colour scheme. And between the two of them, Rizzo and Liu, a joy to watch. They have been over the last 2 years. They bounced onto the scene, and no one really knew what they were going to do right from the get-go. And they completely took the championship by storm right from the opening round. And from there on in, they've never really looked back. And there's no question that of all the drivers, Anthony Liu seems to me, I remember saying at the end of last year that he took my prize as the most, not improved, but the most impressive driver of those I wouldn't expect necessarily to be so. There's a lot of big names out there. You expect big laps, you expect good stints from them. But Anthony Liu, in some of the tasks he was given to try and put the car back on the podium or side his way through from the back of the field after a mistake, were impressive indeed, and he continues to do so. I know you know Anthony pretty good, and he's probably one of the biggest fights we've had here in Asia.
Oh, absolutely. It's funny. You talk about big names at the end of last year. You're talking also about the introduction of the Bentley last year. J.K. Vernet, the Frenchman, open wheel experience, very, very good driver, very serious driver, made the debut of the Bentley and ran towards the front of the field immediately.
Second,
but
at Macau,
Shanghai for that event, you see, as we're talking about him, Anthony Liu's gone straight to the top of the 205.394. Thank you, Anthony. That's perfect.
Yeah, good timing.
Both he and Davide set pole position for the final round of the championship last year, and they were comfortably clear. Shanghai's their home circuit, a little bit of experience, but they haven't done an awful lot of miles. It's interesting, he doesn't say much. When you do a little bit more searching on the Anthony Liu story, he's actually the world record holder with the Bugatti Veyron Vitesse, the open-top car on the Volkswagen Oval, the test circuit. So he has the over 400 km/h world record for that car. It is that man. Now, driving in a circle very quickly in a Bugatti Veyron is a little bit different to racing in GT3 specification racing, but you also talk to some of the AF Corsa mechanics. He's been to Fiorano and tested a former Ferrari F1 car, and all the mechanics there, he's just put a foot wrong now, because I've put the Mozza on him and he's driven a little bit off the circuit, lost a little bit of time there.
I don't think he did lose any time there. He kept his foot in.
He keeps the foot in it. I mean, very aggressive driver. Both he and Davide have also been very aggressive, but also courteous of their competition. There's been a few cases early in their career last year where there was a bit of combat, and that contact actually put them back in the championship and essentially kept them from winning on debut. But Anthony has circulated Fiorano, much to the surprise of many of the Italian mechanics, certainly the F1 mechanics who knew nothing of him, to be almost as quick as their race drivers. So one of the discussions I had with Andrea from AF Corsa last year was that he felt that if at some point in Anthony's life he decided that he wanted to be a racing driver, on merit, he believes he would have made Formula One. That's how good this guy is, but he only does this part-time, he's at the top of the times. See Daniel Lloyd, your young mate who you spoke to yesterday,
yeah,
2:04.4. I mean, that's under the top time from yesterday. This is his debut in this car in this team.
What's impressive about this is the combined field here have probably done a few thousand kilometres, if not laps, around this circuit. Most of the guys you're watching right now, including the Europeans who've raced here, Daniel Lloyd has done none. He'd never been to Sepang, he'd never been to Malaysia up until Thursday. He had about an hour when he got off the plane, was in the car within an hour, and they were putting him through his paces. I'll grant you, the man you just saw there, he's got a good guy in his corner, Darryl O'Young, who's probably got the most laps around this Sepang circuit, whether it be in an Aston Martin or in a Porsche or in anything else for that matter. But very, very impressive. And I think he could be a secret weapon this weekend, Daniel Lloyd. And what a chance he's got. Like I said, I did interview him, and yeah, he's stepping in for Jonathan Ventnor, but actually, this is his big chance to really show what he's got, because it's a very, very hard field. Into the pit comes the sister car of Lyons and Yu. Frank Yu taking a bit of a break with 5 minutes to go. I hope there's no problem there.
Well, it's interesting. What they may have done is they may have elected to send Frank out on the tyres, which were fresh when Richard Lyons went out, put him on that older rubber that Richard Lyons had run. Yeah. Give him a bit of time to be on hotter rubber, then change to the fresher rubber at the end of the session. So that may give him an advantage. You're talking about cooler. I talked to Patrick Diaz. There's a couple of cars going slower, probably trying to set themselves up for a bit of a window to go for a run. But Patrick Diaz from Michelin, the head man here that supports the GT Asia series with the French tyre, he was telling me that it's 28 degrees, so it is cool. 28 degree ambient temperature, 33 degree track temperature prior to the start of qualifying. So not quite as hot as we expected.
Now,
there's a smoking Team New Zealand Porsche. Now that was a McLaren that looked like it may have had a tyre rubbing or some kind of issue just in the background there before we changed shots. Looking to recover that Porsche. That'll be disappointing for the Team New Zealand.
Whoa!
Oh, Jeffrey Lee well off course and a little bit of air
More like
in
Bruce
the Bentley
Lee then.
Continental. Absolutely.
I don't know where Jeffrey was going just then, but anyway.
Well offline. So it says Andy Merrick, he is taking the place of Andy Suchek, who was with us for the 2 Japanese rounds. And he's alongside Jeffrey Lee, former race winner, of course, in the GT Asia Series. So no slouch around the circuits of Asia.
Yes, if we talked about Aston Martin having good replacements, Bentley have got just as many, Andy being one of them. I spoke to him this morning, and yeah, Bentley have got a plethora of great drivers that they can bring in at any part of the world and just jump straight into this Continental and make it fly.
We were talking just about order and drivers and certainly about the Craft Bamboo Racing team and what a great job Daniel Lloyd's doing. But whilst we're talking about that, Hiroshi Hamaguchi moved up into position number 3 in the number 55 Triple F Racing team by ACM McLaren. Of course, a round winner of the championship, the 3rd round. This is an all-new team this year, 3 cars, and they took the win, as did this car last time out when we were in Fuji, the TP12 Racing team of Todd Pitty, and Carlo Van Dam, who did a super impressive job to be in the low 203s in that first qualifying session. Now, if we look at the combinations, Darryl Young was in a reasonable position after the first qualifying session. So, of course, Daniel Lloyd's at the top, but also Biren Bakhti's into position number 4. So you combine his time with Carlo Van Dam, and that's going to be a fairly impressive run. They would more than likely at this stage be on the front row. As to whether they get pole, we'll see how the rest of these 2.5 minutes pans out.
Another thing that worth mentioning, I mentioned we were talking about who would start the race. I think in the case of this particular team, Carlo will start the race because remember, onto the grass he goes. In their particular case, they've got a 5-place penalty for the incident last time out at Fuji.
Of course, yes.
So I think you'll find that's actually going to be the rub with them, which is let's get Carlo in the car, let's get them up the grid to get them back into contention, because they are not, regardless of where they qualify, going to be able to start first.
Now we're talking about GTM class, Takuma Aoki and Ken Urata. Currently, they are the leading GTM class car in this field, ahead of Jerry Wang, 2:11.78, position number 15. So hopefully that is a good sign that they've got their cooling issues sorted with that car. There is one thing we do need to point out. I have not yet seen the number 20 Golf Racing JP Type 991 Cup car. That had a problem last night. They're in the championship hunt too. They had a gearbox issue yesterday after the first practice session, and there was a lot of very concerned faces down there in the garage as we left the Sepang circuit last night, and they were very concerned about whether or not they were going to be able to get a replacement gearbox for that car for the race today. Now we're talking about the number 34 Takuma Aoki and Ken Urata car. Here it is on screen. More than likely that Ken Urata, the Japanese driver who spent a lot of time on the top step or the second step of the podium in the closing stages of last year's championship, will be behind the wheel of that car. Now, if we take a quick look at the order, see whether or not there's anybody down that list that, gee whiz, that's Jackie Young going a little bit wide to give Richie Wee some speed, some space. Where's Richie on the list? He's probably a little bit further back than we would have expected. Currently in position number 9, 2:07.8. So congratulations from Darryl O'Young currently to Daniel Lloyd. They've got nearly a second up on the Davide Rizzo Anthony Liu combination. Both those cars though are in pit lane, so that's enough from them. With 45 seconds to go in the session, that will be it. We will see whether or not any of the other cars can actually make up ground over the closing 30 seconds of this session.
I'll send Sean down to the pit lane, see if he can rustle up some interviews, or at least talk to some of the guys when they come in, with only 24 seconds to go in this qualifying 2 session. As we've said before, this is a preparation, a qualifying session for our first ever 3-hour endurance race in GT Asia. This is the 6th year of the championship, and talking to David Sonninger yesterday, so impressed with the way this particular championship, and of course Motorsport Asia run many championships, and many events and promote many of the events around Asia. But this particular series, the GT Asia series, has grown exponentially in the last few years, and so impressive. And it stands alone now as being the one area of the world where these marques, these famous cars, want to sell their cars, whether it be Porsche, whether it be Aston Martin, Ferrari, or McLaren. They come here to effectively make a showcase of what they've got and use the markets of China and all around Asia to sell these motor cars. And there's no better place to showcase them than in a race like the GT Asia Championship. And I think endurance racing also. That's what it's all about. Le Mans leading the way, of course, as the greatest endurance race in the world. And then you've got the likes of Daytona, Nürburgring, Spa 24 hours. And in fact, now new ones. Austin coming into the fold. Circuit of the Americas, the Lone Star Le Mans coming up in a few weeks' time. In fact, a couple of drivers out there. And I think James Collado will be taking part in that one for Ferrari. Mok Wen-sung coming into shot. He and his teammate looking to get a big result. Ooh, slightly off line there. I said more than slightly. And qualifying 2 winds down and at the top of the board. A good job done by Daniel Lloyd, the silver driver in the number 99. A 2:04.436 ahead of Anthony Liu in the number 37, 458 with a 2:05.394. Hamaguchi also impressive in the McLaren, 2:05.861. Van Dam and Bidambakti, Todd Pitty getting a 4th place overall, a 2:06.1. Lyons and Yu, Caldarelli and Wu, Kato and Wee, Calderado and Mok. I would have thought they'll be a little disappointed, Will Mok Wen-sung, with that result. I'm sure he wanted further up the board than 2:07.0, but it's a double-edged sword. Qualifying is one thing, a 3-hour race is a completely different thing. We get excited, perhaps overly so, about the qualifying times, but if you talk to the drivers and the teams, it's a benchmark. It's not the epitome. This is not a sprint race, and it's more strategic, it's more tactical. They've got to do several changeovers. The drivers will both take 2 stints, and so how you play that out, how you work it out, is going to be the key. So the car's being pushed back. So 2 qualifying sessions done, and our race is a few hours away. It'll be a lot hotter when we get back down to the action of the 3-hour race, which starts local time at 3 p.m. And you can check out the link to our streaming, and as we've said before, feel free to go to the GT Asia website and check out the background, the news, and also feel free to join the conversation by tweeting us and finding out what you need to know about this amazing championship. And you also, if you go to YouTube and also to our website, you can check out previous rounds and previous highlights. Contact between car 78 and 8 at turn 3, and that is under investigation right now. So we'll find out what happened there. And that, interestingly enough, involves also Kedasawa and Adelaide Fong. So that could be very interesting indeed if there's a problem there for Sauer and Fong, because, of course, they're one of the championship contenders and one of the leaders in the championship. So let's go down to Sean, who's got, looks of it, Darrell Young and the man of the moment, Daniel Lloyd. Back to you, Sean.
Daniel, that's a nice way to start this 3-hour race. And Darrell, you'd have to be wrapped. You're leading the championship. You lost your teammate. Now you've got another teammate. And here you are standing on pole for the first ever 3-hour at Sepang.
Yeah, we're really fortunate. Daniel did a fantastic lap. It was a great job by him. My lap wasn't very tidy, but it was still a good performance. So I think altogether we're very happy to be on the front row.
Daniel, how are you feeling? I mean, this must be a little bit surreal, mustn't it? Your first race in, you've set pole. Now you're going to start from the front row. That's got to be pretty impressive.
Yeah, I'm just over the moon. It's all come really quick. The deal was put together a week and a half ago. First time out to Asia, first time out to Sepang. Working with the team really hard. The guys done a great job with the car. So, yeah, both me and Darrell did a great job and nice consistent laps and front row, so couldn't be happier.
Next question now, Daryl, is who starts?
We haven't really gone through the race strategy yet, although the race is this afternoon. There's some breaks, so we're going to look through everything and see how it goes. But the key point is this is just one step of the race. The next is the big step, the 3-hour race. We're really going to focus on just minimizing mistakes. I think that's going to be really the key factor in winning today. So this is just a small step, and we're happy to be on the front row, but it's a lot of work to do still. Daniel,
Clearly you're hot. How are you coping with the heat?
I'm from the north of England, so at the moment it's like 12, 14 degrees, so not well. I've got a cool top for the race, so I personally think Darrow should start because he's more adapted to the weather. That's my excuse. So obviously you have to sit in the car for 15 minutes before the start of a race, so yeah, I'm getting there.
Thanks, guys. Congratulations, and back up to you, Johnny.
Thanks, Sean. Yeah, good northern lad. He's negotiating. I like to see that. He says it's too hot to start the race. But a great combination between the two of them. Well done to Daniel Lloyd. They, of course, the championship leaders with Adelaide Fong and Kerisau. Some highlights then from our qualifying, and it was a good qualifying session. Not too many dramatic incidents, and you wouldn't expect it in a qualifying session. A little bit of traffic at times for the number 37. They will be a factor, Risso and Liu, and they have been a factor in every race we've had so far, every race they've taken part in. And everybody warming tyres and getting up to speed. We had the professionals out first, then the gentleman drivers, so to speak. Though really, when you think about someone like Daniel Lloyd, very impressive indeed in his first outing at the circuit to take the pole position. Mok Wen-sung, not as happy, I'm sure, as he would want, given he is probably the most successful driver in the history of this circuit. And he'll be taking that number 1 car out. Clearwater, you can see the faces of the Clearwater racing team. Frank Yu also will be a factor, I'm sure, in this race, and he, another one of the gentleman drivers who's made such an impact on this series. Carlo Van Dam and Ben Bakti also very impressive in the qualifying. Triple F Racing trying to get on with their situation and trying to get the best out of the cars. We had a second qualifying session, effectively 15 minutes as well. And as we've mentioned before, 2 distinct championships, the GT3 championship and the older GTM cars, also racing for podiums and points. So even though they may be losing out in terms of time on track and also being not as quick as the GT3 cars, they are racing as hard as they can for their podium as well. But in the end, it was Darrell Young and Daniel Lloyd in the VLT Aston Martin Vantage who took the pole, and impressively so. And a few shenanigans for the number 7 Bentley, bouncing over the curbs, and they were in the wars a few times. There was a couple of stoppages out on track. The McLaren of Hamaguchi and Liuzzi looking good, though. Second place of the combined times, Van Dam and Bidham Bakti. And rounding out the top 3, Risso and Liu. Those are the top 3. Oh, Young, though, and Lloyd, though, it is who take pole position here for the GT3 Asia Championship.